Welcome to the buymeacoffee.com/James Poeartistry, the coffee tips page that supports my James Poeartistry creative productions and work. See also jamespoeartistry.online. You know, Perceptive readers, I do feel that we should be able to enjoy each day of life no matter what we are doing. That may not always be the case, but for the most part, I think that is what the outlook is in this life. You see, I don't believe that we should actually look for ways to make life harder on ourselves when in reality there's enough of trouble and turmoil and agitation to go around the globe. So there's already an unbalance there as far as the negative aspects of the world. So where does the positive aspects of the world come from? It comes from you and it comes from I. So since we already got that unbalance over there, then we want to find the balance for ourselves. And that means pursuing good things for ourselves and even for others. Okay. Another thought is this. As we take or savor each day at a time, we want to keep in mind that we don't want to digress either. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. So this is actually an encouragement as well for people who are building businesses. And I'm always talking about qualification or the appropriateness of wages. And I've also said the minimum which the United States of America has done a fairly decent job at doing is setting a minimum wage. Yes, every year a lot of people complain about it, especially with the cost of living. All the same, people know, even in those states of what they call no fault, where you could just be let go just like that or what have you without no justification. But even in states like that, wherever you work, you're going to get some type of wage and a minimum that may have been established across the state board, the state line. Now, along with that, see, the same goes for jobs that we have today. I want to use an expression to go along with this. And remember how I tell you that you have to deal with a person at times according to their experience with God. So your experience with God, and let me tell you, can be totally different than what this individual is who you're talking with or dealing with. And so in that case, you may be able to say just this basic statement, even about prayer, to this one person, the same way you would of someone else who has a similar experience with God as you do. And it will not be readily accepted. It'll even be some difficulty of understanding with that. And see, and that's what you have to keep in mind. And so I've used that analogy as exactly how you heard it. But see, I want to apply it as to technology today, to advancements today, the cost of living, the improvement, the quality of life. Remember how Charlie Munger mentioned since the time of the Great Depression that happened around about the 30s, I believe, 1930s, around about that time, 20s, 30s, what have you, that he said the quality of life has increased over 600%. Isn't that interesting? And then that's when he went on to also state in his interview that it's still envy that actually drives the world more instead of just the development of mankind, you see, to develop their skills, their spirituality. You know, these are extra thought that I'm telling you, but because he was just concentrating more on, it's the envy. It's normally people being driven by wanting something somebody else has in order to take them to the next level, rather than just going ahead and still developing their own intellectual and spiritual mind and heart. You see? And this is what I want to talk about, as far as, even though we try to enjoy each day, we don't want to digress either, because see, in some contemplations or understanding and implementation of persons who even have the authority and the money, if you will, to implement such type of research and things of that nature. See, what they have put forth in some of their papers is bringing back difficult situations of living in order to somehow improve the mental state, the appreciation of the civilizations today, the citizens today in their locality. And that's the way they feel. So that's what I mean about digressing. So it even goes back to, as some people were mentioning, I even heard one famous star mention recently about the wagon train days, etc., the toughness of the people, what they had to do to make it, which of course that was even then. And the tools that they even used, this is me telling you, the tools that they used required a lot of manpower and strength and stamina to use. And yet for some of them, when they bought those tools back in those 1800s, you see, wagon train days and stuff like that, you couldn't tell them that they didn't have top-notch technology when they got that new type of double-headed plow. You see, so like, hey, I don't have to use one animal. I got two animals. It's double the speed that I'm going to be to till this land. New technology. Yet today, you don't see us in the Western lands. You see the developed lands around the world having to purchase those plows. In fact, even in the other lands, you see, that may not be as advanced, because you still have your common farmers and stuff like that. Yeah, they still use animals or what have you. But for the most part, many of them, even their own homes and stuff in the bush, they have some form of technology that still wasn't even back in the 1800s. And what I'm stating is, they shouldn't have that taken away from them just to make them further go along to appreciate what they already have in this day and age of the 2000s, you see, in this century that we're in. I am a strong believer in what even Thomas Sowell had mentioned about how he does not believe in taking a person who is already bad off or what have you, and then making them worse off than what they're in, still in the interest of the betterment of them. See, I'm a strong believer in that quote. I don't believe you have to do that. I don't believe it's necessary. And yet you have people who are like that. And so in those cases, that's what I mean. I feel like they're digressing. And so let me give you an example of this, and this still going into really your own businesses. This happened to be this. Years ago, I can't remember what the first programming language was, because some people would say it was the basic language, but I think it was something even before that. And then when I am able to remember what it was before that, I know from what I understand, it was something even before that I just can't recall to memory. And I did not look it up before I came. I mean, people may tell you, even today in college, Oh, well, there was a COBOL. There was a C++. No, there was C. No, there was and they name these other languages that even today to show you how time flies by, that they still won't hit those language or touches on those languages that I'm telling you about. That was way back in the 30s or 40s or what have 1900s or what have you. Make no mistake about it. You may sometimes hear this language came out in the 1950s or 60s, and really, because of hearing that as the first language, you don't realize, or it's not even talked about really in history books, what it was before that, you see. Now, let me tell you about, not digressing. You see, as people were learning those different languages, now I want to let you know, no, I'm not a programmer. No, it's just something that I still learned in my field, in the consulting that I had to do. Now, the whole point is this, not digressing. There were some persons that when they started learning even those languages, like, around about the sea in that area, that was like, oh man, just awesome, back then or what have you. They were so good at it, efficient at it, etc., that then when other languages started coming out, programming languages, what it did was it caused even these different employers to say, will you go ahead and learn that language? Now, sometimes the person who wanted to learn a new language, they had to, share with the employer why they wanted to learn it in the first place. And let me tell you what the results was of what they did. That's why the employer was like, I'm going to give you that and that much more, and room, board, etc. Because they saw the benefit. Well, what was it that they did? Well, this was something that I had been thinking about for the past several days, and it was interesting that I saw an example just pop up, in my feed today as well. And I said, oh yeah, well, I'm going to talk about this today because I've seen people do this or show this. What the programming languages are always supposed to do is, one, to be made in a way that they're more secure. They're supposed to be easier to learn. I don't know about all that, but they're supposed to be easy to learn. Let me emphasize again, I don't know about all that. But they're also supposed to be clear of the limitations of what the programming languages were before then. And then it's supposed to make things even more concise and quicker to do. So, as they came out with newer programming languages, in times past, if they had to write, let's say they just wanted to write a code for a simple website. Now imagine already having millions of lines. Maybe I'm exaggerating. There were at least thousands of lines of coding or sentences, if you will. I'm just using that because that's just a common word to use for most people, even though they mostly just stick to saying it's a code or a script or what have you. But imagine back then them putting a whole lot of elaborate hours worth of work in, days and weeks, to come up with this elaborate, compiled, because that's what they would do. They would take all these code, these thousands of lines of code, and then compile it in a way that it would run to produce this or produce that website. But then imagine a new programming language coming out, and the next thing you know, instead of those hundreds of pages or thousands of pages of code, it has now been condensed or concise down to just a few hundred, and even less. Isn't it something? Because then what was happening in the new programs that were being made is they just naturally started creating what you can call these modules that naturally now come or is built in even with the code. So you don't always have to, what I would say, reinvent the wheel. because the will is even already put in the code, unlike it was in the early days. Now, I share that with you. Why? To go to show you that even programmers who are struggling today at times, through life and even feel like they're overwhelmed, then, you might have one manager or so may say, well, you know what? We're going to put you back in the basic days so you can fully appreciate this and that. And, and I'm here to say you don't have to do that. There's other ways because there's more of going on, but that's what I'm telling you about, not digressing and just going ahead and appreciate what we have today, the technology we have today. You see, we learn from history. That doesn't mean we should return back to the dark ages in order to make people appreciate it, because in this case, I referenced Thomas Sowell quote again about don't believe in taking a person who's already bad off and then making them worse off in the interest of somehow making them better. Because no, humans, and see, this get back to, you have to deal with a person with their own experience. I said experience in God, but now I'm going to say experience in life, period. So you can do something for one person, and then one person might be like, oh, okay, because they're more on the same sheet of music of where you're going. But I'm always looking towards, what about the person who isn't? So I shared all these different examples to really today just say, appreciate what we do have today, the time period that we do have today, because, sometimes it's not even always a lack of appreciation of thinking that, familiarity breeds contempt, which that does play into some people. It does. What I'm just addressing is, as far as where it comes to situations where you feel like people not appreciating this or that, well, you know what? That comes a time where say, let's talk about it a little bit more. Let's use the type of reasoning factor the same way even some of those persons who used to know some of those old programming languages, when they wanted their boss to pay for their schooling or what have you, was able to show them, this is the benefit you will get if you go ahead and cover my tuition. And then, as I told you again, some companies, very generous companies back in the day, they may not have had the whole money, the huge bank account that a company like Google has today, but make no mistake about it. Those employees, some of them, I'm just telling you, depending on what company you work for, they were still treated very well. They were paid very well. You see, because they were able to already show the benefit of if the employer continued, let me throw in that, appreciating already the golden goose and the golden eggs that they're producing. The quality of work would come that much more into the excellence field. And that's what a lot of companies found out. Thank you for being here today, Perceptive readers. Take care.